This is from the Wheelhouse with Annapolis School of Seamanship.
Welcome back to the Wheelhouse. I'm Captain John Martino, founder and CEO of Annapolis School of Seamanship. This is Captain Matt Benhoff, Vice President of Annapolis School of Seamanship. Todd Lochner, Admiralty lawyer from Lochner Law Firm. And we're going to talk a little bit. It's about getting back on the water and making sure you have all the right equipment on your boat to be legal. Captain Matt, you were a Coast Guard boarding officer. You're our local boat cop, so talk,
long time ago. But as you get ready for the season to get on the water, one thing you want to do is make sure you have all your required equipment. And so you can do this a lot of different ways. You can go right to the Maryland website. They've got an equipment checklist. The Coast Guard Auxiliary has a checklist. And whichever state you're boating in, you just want to make sure you're up to speed on that state's specific requirements for equipment.
And you have the Maryland, we're in Maryland,
Yep.
So we'll use the Maryland checklist, and it's put out by DNR, right? Department of Natural Resources, Natural Resources Police.
Correct.
Talk to me about, there's different categories.
So they got different categories for personal watercraft, your jet skis, sea-doos, stuff like that. You've got boats less than 16 feet, and then you've got boats 16 feet to less than 26 feet now. The requirements change based on the length of the vessel. So this is just covering these three categories. And so going through here, one of the things you definitely need is a boating safety education certificate. So anyone born after 1972 in Maryland, that also changes per state. Right. So again, check your state's laws. Has to have that boating safety card. You have to have a certificate of the vessel registration. So you have to have a registration card, and you have to have the registration numbers on the side of the hull. And there's some specific rules to those, being like 1-inch block letters with 1-inch spacing and things like that. So it gets pretty specific.
Okay, and you can look all that up online at your state boating law administrator. Whether it's in Maryland, it's the Department of Natural Resources, but in other states, it could be the DMV or some other state agency that manages the boating regulations.
Right. And then moving on, you've got your big ticket items, your PFDs, your personal flotation devices, or your life jackets. There's got to be one for every person on board. And there's actually some things that go along with that PFD for every person on board. It needs to be, one, readily accessible, so it can't be buried under a bunch of gear. Two, it's got to fit. That was one of the things I always like to see when someone pulled out a child-sized life jacket for a full-grown adult.
That doesn't count?
That doesn't fly.
Okay.
So we usually make them try one to prove that point. So, And then there's some specific laws regarding children under 13 and with boats with cabins and boats without cabins having to wear PFDs. Again, you want to check your specific state law to make sure you're following those rules. And PFDs for toddlers and things like that need to have a crotch strap and a lifting handle in the back of them. So again,
some of these rules are federal and some are state, right? But by going to your state boating law site, then you're going to see all that, right, Todd?
Well, that is one place to look for it, but there are a couple of nuanced things that occur. Matt just mentioned readily accessible for the life jackets. So it's springtime here now. We're shooting this in April. And everybody goes and says, I'm going to really help out my local shop, West Marine or otherwise. I'm getting a whole new set of life jackets. The old ones are moldy. Prevent that mold this year. I'm not going to take them out of the protective plastic that they come in. Well, guess what? That is no longer readily accessible if you keep it in its protective plastic. So one of the things when there's a casualty that occurs, we as Admiralty lawyers will step on the vessel and we look for, are those life jackets still in the plastic?
That's interesting, because what about the bags that they sell at these boat stores for life jackets? They're labeled life jackets, and some of them have zippers, some of them are Velcro. You put all the life jackets in that bag. That's still readily accessible?
It's still readily accessible as long as they're not zip tied together, because I've seen the zippers zip tied together when you first buy them, and you have to cut the zip tie. And I've seen people who have failed to do that. They're no longer readily accessible life jackets.
If they're zip tied, they're not accessible at all.
Yeah, that would be you not want to run into that in an emergency.
So, and it's different. Now, Matt, the throwable PFD, the Type 4, has to be what's called immediately accessible. What does that mean?
Again, that means like not like under a floorboard. It's got to be somewhere where at the helm or nearby you can just reach it and grab it and throw it.
So that's not in a locker.
Yeah,
You
not in
can't-
a locker
You can have your life jackets, your regular life jackets, in a locker,
or compartment or something like that. Yep,
but the throwable has to be immediately accessible.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Same goes with fire extinguisher, readily accessible. And I'm kind of curious if it comes down to, I see a lot of people leave them in the boxes that they purchase them in. I wonder if that would interfere with the readily accessible like the plastic does for the PFDs. But
I don't have a case on that particular one, but there is a case that is about fire extinguishers on recreational boats that's worth mentioning here. Not only should you be checking your flares, but you also need to check the expiration dates on fire extinguishers. The Supreme Court of the United States has spoken for the first time in decades on maritime law, and specifically on a policy by an insurance company which incorporates New York law. And one of the things that that policy allowed for is that there did not need to be any coverage by the insurance company if the fire extinguisher was expired. It has nothing to do with whether there's anything causally related in any way, shape, or form. I was litigating a case, lightning strike. Insurance company says, well, the fire extinguisher, even though there was no fire, was not up to speed, so we don't have to cover your claim. Grounding. Fire extinguisher was not up to speed, so we don't have to cover your claim. So keep in mind that, number one, the big picture is some insurance company, you're just buying a right to litigate against your own insurance company. Here's a prime example. The fire extinguisher is one, and the Supreme Court said they can apply New York law, and you know what? The guy with the fire extinguisher, too bad. You don't have a claim anymore because you didn't have the fire extinguisher up to date. Another reason that when the lawyer comes on after a casualty, they're looking for flares that are not expired, because you may not have all your safety gear. You may not have a vessel that is reasonably fit for its intended voyage, therefore not seaworthy. Therefore, if the carrier doesn't want to pay the claim, they don't have to.
So that's the thing. They're saying that if you don't have, if your flares are expired, your fire extinguisher is expired, then the vessel's not seaworthy, and then the vessel not being seaworthy disqualifies the claim. Is that
That's
the gist of it?
That is one good gist of it, but there's a distinction here. I'm talking about these legal nuances of games insurance companies play.
Mm-hmm.
Separate in what Matt has been describing is you have to have the readily accessible as per the codes, both the local, state, as well as the federal.
So there's two different things here. I mean, we're talking about getting a ticket. Well, there are three things. The safety first.
Safety, the ticket, and then the insurance end of this.
Right. So three different sides of this.
All reason why you want to make sure you have all this equipment before you get your season started.
It's probably a good time to insert this. I know we didn't talking about this per se ahead of time, but a good friend of mine works in an insurance company, told me about he's saying one of their insured was driving down the road, and the wheel, the bearing on the trailer came off. The wheel came off basically because the bearing hadn't been greased, and it hit somebody. So that's a case of you've got to also be thinking about your trailer, right?
Right.
Your trailer. It's not just your trailer lights and your tag and the sticker on your plate.
The tires and everything.
It's the tires. Are they dry rotted? Did you grease the hubs?
You always see those trailers on the side of the road with the one side jacked up and missing a tire.
Yeah.
I always think that person having a really bad day.
Yeah. You're just trying to get to the boat ramp.
Yeah.
And so, all right. So we have the safety requirements. So some real practical reasons. First of all, safety first, obviously.
Yep.
But also some nuance to it. It's probably a good idea not to have your fire extinguisher in the box.
Yeah.
I would say that from a safety and seamanship point of view, regardless of whether you have a case on it or not, it's a good idea to have that out of the box and readily accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's best that extinguishers are mounted in a bracket. So it's not just enough that the little dial's in the green, but there's some other things. The little tie, the plastic tie that prevents the pin from falling out, that has to be intact.
Yep. The
needle has to be in the green. And if you're firing up your boat for the first time in the winter, it's a good idea to take the extinguisher out of the bracket and turn it upside down and
Bang on the bottom of it.
Why do we do that, Matt?
So that dry chemical inside the fire extinguisher, especially over a season, it just bouncing around the boat tends to compact in the bottom of the cylinder, so that if you did go to use it, you might just get mainly gas that comes out and not the dry chemical. So by flipping it over, banging on the bottom, you'll actually feel that dry chemical break up and make sure it's actually usable when you need it.
It also tells you that it's going to come out of the bracket. Sometimes, I can't tell you how many times, getting ready for delivery, Todd, and I'll go to check that and go to open the bracket. It's so dry rotted from the sun and everything that the bracket just goes to pieces on you, it breaks off. And
yeah.
So that happens. Also check around the nozzle to see if there's any powder or dry chemical around the nozzle. Give you an idea that there was a leak. Life jackets out of the plastic.
And do also make sure that if you're going to replace your fire extinguisher, you're getting the proper fire extinguisher, A, B, C, or a BC, the joint.
Yep.
And so you want something that's going to handle both, in most recreational vessels, both the electrical and the fuel.
Yeah, and there are specifications on that, I think, depending on the size of boat, whether it has to be a BC or an ABC. I don't remember that.
They've got the B1 fire extinguishers. You can have two B1s or one B2 fire extinguisher. That again goes into the length of vessel and the specific requirements.
To make it simple, A, B, and C are classes of fire, and then the number that comes out after that is its capacity of firefighting that type of fire, that class of fire. All right, so besides that, what do we have, Matt?
So another one on here, which is pretty interesting, is the ignition safety switch. That law has changed over the past, 2 years now?
Oh, you mean the kill switch?
The kill switch,
yeah.
Most people refer to it as. Always required on a personal watercraft.
Mm-hmm.
But over the past, I think, year or two now, they've changed the law here, and it's a federal law.
Federal. Yeah.
They changed it now. You have to have it on all vessels less than 26 feet, and if it's going over, what was it, the speed? I don't recall.
I don't remember. I just remember less than 26 feet, you pretty much need to
have it. And if you're not, if you're just motoring slow through the harbor, things like that, if you're off planing speed, you don't need to have it on. But if you're planing speed or better, you have to have it on you. So that's a new rule that's come out.
You haven't seen any case law on the kill switch yet?
Not in this context, which you're referring to.
Okay.
Not in this context.
So let's see.
The flares, Matt. I want to talk about the flares real quick. So that's a visual distress signal. Flares, pyrotechnics, obviously, that's one way to do it. There are some products out there, right?
There are some products that they're replaced with an electronic. So it's basically like a flashlight with batteries that will meet the requirements here to cover you for the visual distress signals. I think that they're a good thing to have on board and to back you up, but as far as being easy is as good as seen as well as some of the pyrotechnics, I don't know.
Seems like a double-edged sword because you and I have done the training. We were training people for a while, and we had handheld flares, and we did all the things with the protective glasses and the gloves and had people lighting flares, and it's not necessarily, it's something, if flares are what you're carrying, this is something you should try doing. Obviously, you don't want to do it anywhere near the water or anywhere near anything flammable, but if you've never lit a flare, a handheld flare, it's something that takes a second to get used to, and you have to be careful. We had one guy, instead of hitting the striker against the flare, I'll never forget this, he kept pulling the flare towards him. We're like, stop.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get a chance to actually try those out in a controlled training environment, it's a great opportunity to see how handheld flares or even the smokes work. Because both of those, if you're not done correctly, could make the situation potentially worse.
Right.
So it's good to train with those. As far as your daytime and nighttime distress signals, I can't stress enough making sure every year you check the inspection or the expiration date on them, and make sure you check just the overall condition of them, if they've been sitting in water or something like that. So I always recommend that they're kept in some type of watertight case and, again, readily accessible.
Okay. So if we don't talk about this, we know we'll get it in the comments.
No doubt.
What do I do with my expired flares?
Well, I've always talked to some fire departments will take them, some will not. Some Coast Guard units will take them, some will not. Some schools will take them. Some
Okay. You don't mean like
not like
not kindergarten.
not kindergarten
It's-
schools, but like maritime schools. Excuse
Yeah.
me.
So we took them for a while, but
We don't take them anymore.
Something else just to throw in that I'm a big fan of is actually having a through-hull plug attached to every through-hull in the vessel.
A bung, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I see so many vessels that I've gotten on that don't have any through-hulls, plugs at all, much less have them attached and readily accessible where you need them. Because if you've never experienced a failure of a through-hull on the water while underway, it is a level of pucker factor with the amount of water that is coming into the boat.
Yep.
You don't want to walk away. You want to grab it and plug it, not go rummaging through the bottom drawer of a locker somewhere looking for it or the right size.
Yeah, a hole in the bottom of the boat usually gets your attention.
Yeah.
It's like very exciting.
It is very exciting, but
To say the least.
So
many,
yeah,
but
bung-
I have to say that many people have never experienced that while underway.
It's a good thing.
Yeah,
What would
that's
you do?
true. So the little cones, little wooden cones that fit that through hole, a bung that you can shove in there. I've also seen offshore boats which also have little mallets attached to every one to pound the bung in. Good idea but not a requirement.
Not a requirement.
But a good idea.
Yep.
For sure.
Oh, all the things that we're covering here, just this is the required stuff that we've been talking about. There's a whole list of things that we could go on in a whole nother talk about what you should have on board, depending on what type of boating you're doing.
Anything else? Give us a good one, Matt.
Well, there's some stuff in here. Navigation lights, if you're going to be out past sunset and
Mhm.
sunrise, you need to make sure you should check these. If you plan on being out during the day, check to make sure your navigation lights work.
I see this all the time. People are like, I don't plan to be out at night, but when else do we have to have them on?
During restricted visibility,
Which is things like
rain,
rain.
fog, snow.
Yeah, you weren't planning to be out in the rain, but all of a sudden a thunderstorm blows up. Now you're supposed to have your navigation lights on. And if there are consequences, Todd, if I get into a collision and I don't have my navigation lights working properly,
Well, it comes back to the inland rules, the gist of which there's a rule called the Pennsylvania rule. And if you have breached one of the inland rules and you do have a collision, the onus, the burden of proof, is going to shift to you to prove that that violation of the inland rule, in this case, having the proper nav lights on when you're supposed to, that in no way could have contributed to the casualty or you lose and you're liable. It's a pretty substantial rule, the Pennsylvania rule. And so anytime there's an inland rules violation, whether it's a failure to sound, failure to have the proper lights, or it's clearly a steering violation, all of those things are the kinds of things we're looking for because we need to see, wait a minute, does the Pennsylvania rule apply? Because now the complete burden shifts to the other party.
So you could have been doing what you thought was nothing, but
Right.
gotten yourself in quite a bit of trouble.
right. So it's a good practical measure. We'll post this Maryland DNR
Yep.
list.
Yep, we'll post it. And you mentioned signaling. So that's another thing that's also a requirement you want to make sure you have, and it works, is a horn, a whistle, or a bell on your vessel, depending on the length of it. So less than 39.4 feet, some efficient means. So a whistle will work. Over that, then you're going to need to look at, I think, bell at 20 meters.
Yeah.
And although we've been trying to stick to the requirements, I'm going to throw one more practical in.
Mhm.
Just put a whistle on your life jacket.
Yeah.
Just put a whistle on, because if you're overboard, you need to be able to signal. And there have been two out here in the harbor behind us. I've had two circumstances where the fact that I've had a whistle that I can just pop into my mouth hanging off my life jacket has helped save 2 lives of people that were in the water as I'm trying to get, in the middle of the winter, more people to come and help me get this person.
Wow.
So you have to just, it's so simple.
Whistle on the life jacket. Yep. And they sell those at the same place they sell the life jackets.
Yep, that's easy.
inflatable life jackets. That's, we keep trying to say, oh, but one more thing.
Yeah.
One more thing. But inflatable life jackets is worth talking about.
It is. Most people find that wearing, the traditional PFD can be uncomfortable, so you find a lot of people not always wearing them. This is where the inflatable life jackets, PFDs, I think are really important because they're much more comfortable to wear.
Which means you're more likely to wear it.
You're more likely to wear it. But the one thing that legally is they don't count as one of your PFDs on board if you're not wearing it.
So you can't just have a bunch of inflatables in the locker and say we're covered.
Yep, you have to be wearing it. So.
And we keep saying one more thing.
But wait.
Wait, there's
also
more.
a set of steak knives.
I recently participated in the Marine Trades Association of Maryland's Safety at Sea program, which is part of what you have to do to be qualified. X number of years you have to do it. I think it's once every 5 years. And there's an in-the-water aspect where you're in the pool over at the Naval Academy and you jump in with your inflatable life jacket on so that the CO2 cartridge explodes, and then you have to get into the life raft, all your gear on, blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that if you've never actually done it is if you are going to replace your tab and your CO2 cartridge anyway, it's usually in the spring that you're doing it, so it's cold. But if you can find a warm spot, jump in, see what it's like. And most people, when it's inflated, have to deflate it some because it is too uncomfortable to even move it around, look around, get into the life raft or anything of that nature. Most people have to do a little deflation in order just to be able to get into a life raft.
Yep.
And I remember when we actually worked with Marine Trades on that the first time, and so it was a series of evolutions. What people were most surprised at when we did that was how tight, like if they had it cinched tight, as soon as it inflates, it gets a little tighter. So you don't want it loosey-goosey so it can go up over your head, but you also don't want it like really tight. When you're wearing it when it's not inflated, because it will get a little tighter when it inflates.
Yep.
And then that deflation is controlled by the oral inflation tube.
Yep.
So yeah, a lot of things to learn. You can learn a lot by doing just what you said. Jump in the water, and then
watch it inflate, and then it gives you a good chance to learn how to do the rearming kit for it, and then repack it. And if you're going to do that, most of the inflatable PFDs, if you go to their website, they've got instructions on how to rearm them and how to repack them properly.
Also, we should put in the link to a video Chesapeake Bay magazine did on inflatable life jacket.
Yeah.
So, all right. So
no more steak knives.
No, I think we got all. Well, I'm sure there's 10. We could go on and on.
Yeah.
But I think that's it for now. But so for all of us here in the Wheelhouse, Annapolis School of Seamanship, Lochner Law Firm, thanks for watching. All right, Matt. If people are liking what they're seeing here,
They're going to like and subscribe for more and leave comments for what they want to hear more about.